And welcome, everybody, to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I've got a fantastic show planned for you here. Let's see, Cameron charged with an ethics complaint right after, of course, he was on our show. A few days later, he gets charged with an ethics complaint. Kind of a crazy story when you start digging into it. Definitely looks politically motivated by, of course, Beshear. Speaking of Beshear, let's see here. We've got Beshear is doing more to help our budget out here in Kentucky as far as being a conservative budget than any Republican has ever done in the state. Beshear is doing more to force us to some sort of fiscal responsibility and power in budgeting because of some of the actions he's taking that is leading to him getting sued by Auditor Ball. You may be thinking, Andrew, are you saying something nice about Beshear? I am. He's doing something that, while I disagree entirely with what he's doing, the ending result of this, just based upon pure politics, will be, I think, a more conservative, fiscally sound budget here in Kentucky. A lot of waste cut out of it necessarily because, well, Beshear's just kind of forcing the Republicans' hands. I'll dig into that. Also, as well, Beshear's podcast has on big old Cal Perry. Also, he said he's looking at running for president, of course, on that podcast as well. He had to literally manufacture it himself. It's doing really, really bad. Like, I know I've talked about how bad it is before. We'll go over some numbers just based on that Cal Perry episode to tell you just how awful this is. It's a testament to he's definitely got a Kamala Harris thing going on. The more he talks, the less people like what he has to say, clearly, because people are just toting that guy out. But it looks like, though, on the story of the podcast, he may have found a way to get backdoor payoffs. From big Democrat donors and big industries here in Kentucky. We'll discuss that in more detail. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig down into it, please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Sorry, I'm adjusting the mic there for people who can't see what I just did, and if I sound suddenly so different, trying to adjust the mic there, get a little bit more comfortable for me. I apologize. Anyways, but without further ado, let's dig down into it. So, Cameron's ethics complaint. Let me give you the backstory here, what this stems from. This was a story in 2023. This is nothing new as far as what the allegations are about. Hold on, I gotta adjust this. There we go. That's better for me. Okay. So, anyways, you guys just had a cut there as I adjusted this mic. I got started, didn't feel like refilming and re-recording. Anyway, so this isn't new. In 2023, Daniel Cameron was found that he had accidentally, and I'll go into what I mean by that, accidentally received money from an individual and was planning a fundraiser from an individual that is actually under investigation from his office. As soon as Cameron found out, he returned it. Now, Cameron's going to say, of course, that at the time he said this, it was an accident. He just was calling donors, asked this guy for money. He gave him money. And I got to be honest, I believe that, 100% believe that. I mean, so I don't know how many active cases the Attorney General's office has like right now. What I do know is they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on lawyers' fees out of that office. So that means they've got to be having at least a fair amount of cases, I'd say a couple hundred at least at a time, and different actions that the Attorney General's office is looking at and working on. Obviously, not every single person is completely aware. Maybe Cameron at one point is in a briefing, was told about this case, dealing with this person, said, okay, great, deal with it. Delegating, obviously, you're not going to argue or be fully involved with the dozens of cases going on in your office. And so he is unaware. Obviously, that's a little bit embarrassing from a political standpoint. You would expect and you would say it's a good attack line. If there was, shoe on the other foot, if I was attacking a Democrat here, and I would definitely be going after them for not knowing what's going on in your office, just being honest. I think we can all agree on that. But I understand why, from like a sheer operational standpoint, I understand why it's not a good look. Regardless, once he realized, so that's the real it's not really an ethics problem as far as taking the money. It's more of a not knowing about the dozens upon dozens upon dozens and if probably hundreds of cases that your office is working at a given time, not knowing about every single one of them. That's what he's more so guilty of. And honestly, none of us in that position would know about it, though all of us politically would attack somebody else who didn't know. So it is what it is. So that's not new. There's no new revelation here. And yet he's now getting charged from the executive ethics board over it. The complaint was brought by AFL-CIO, which is a labor union group. The UAW, United Auto Workers, is a subsidiary of that union. It's no surprise, Beshear has been really friendly with the unions here in Kentucky. There's a lot of push-pull going on between Ford and the auto unions here in Kentucky recently, especially with that electric vehicle battery plant. We saw Beshear trying the best he could to stay on the union side while not, of course, upsetting one of his corporate donors. But anyways, regardless, they filed this complaint to the executive ethics, which, by the way, the board as it's comprised right now have all been appointed by Beshear. And I want to pause there for a second and say we have got to fix that. If you have a legislative ethics board, I would say it should be appointed by the executive branch. Like maybe every office of the executive branch gets to appoint one person to a legislative ethics board, and then vice versa. When it's a executive ethics board, I think it should be appointed by the legislature. It's weird to me that the executive branch is appointing the commissioners, the people that oversee the ethics of the executive branch, kind of like a fox watching the hen house situation. I didn't realize that was going on until this case kind of flared up, and I started looking at how is this board chosen, and I realized they're all appointed by Beshear, and that the executive branch is appointing their own ethics board. Kind of crazy going on here. But it's interesting that this complaint's being brought and Cameron's being charged here, but there is new information when we look at a not even similar complaint, a much larger ethics problem going on from the Beshear campaign at the same time. And that was involving the straw donor scheme involving Mayor Weddle there, where he was using the same credit card to give, I believe it was north of $100,000 or somewhere right around there, to the Beshear campaign and the Democrats. Machine the accusations here, and it's proven he did it because they had to return the money, but he was using the same credit card, then making donations in different people's names. That's called a straw donor. That's what's alleged, and it's, like I said, Beshear ended up returning the money after the fact, though it looks like they were trying to juice some new text messages came out in this investigation, just some new text messages came out about it, where it looks like the Beshear may have been perfectly aware that this was going on as indicated by the messages, and it looked like they're just trying to juice their numbers really before a filing deadline and trying to pump it up there a few $100,000. It's a weird situation, but that's what politicians do. They want to pump those numbers up. And so anyways, so that's new. Nothing from the Ethics Commission about that, but this 2-year-old charge on Cameron, that is what's getting their attention. And that certainly reeks of corruption going on with Beshear. I mean, many of you know I'm in court myself suing Beshear for improper use of government powers against a political opponent. I mean, he's for political reasons, as we are charging him with in the cases, withholding my ability to hold certain licenses because he doesn't like me politically. And that's First Amendment retaliation. That's what he's being sued for. We had just pierced. He was trying to claim he had absolute immunity from it in his position, and the appeals court just ruled in our favor that he does not. We have pierced that governmental immunity, so that's pretty solid. Good stuff there. But so I'm not new to this. It's not surprising to me at all, but it looks like that's what's going on in this situation. But coming up after this, Beshear is doing a lot to make our state a more conservative, fiscally speaking, conservative state without even realizing it. We'll have that after this short break. And you're back here with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So Beshear helping us out, I think the end result of what Beshear's doing here, it's going to force the GOP legislature to actually be super fiscally responsible here, hopefully in their next budget. Maybe they'll take some cues here and learn from what's going on and deliver us the actual most conservative budget Kentucky's ever had. Let me explain. So Auditor Ball has sued Beshear over not implementing Senate Bill 151 from 2024. This is an interesting bill. It was a bipartisan bill. It flew through the legislature. Beshear even signed it. What it does is it allows family members who take custody of an abused or neglected child to apply for foster care benefits within 120 days of placement by the cabinet. So basically, if instead of, a child is taken from parents for whatever reason, or taken from home for whatever reason, the goal is to keep that child with family if they can. And so instead of putting them into foster care, and it would now allow these family members that say, okay, we'll foster that kid as their direct family member. Now, if somebody who wasn't their a member of their family was fostering them, they would get money from the state. This would allow the members of the family of the child to take care of them. It's a law that makes a lot of sense, I think, if we're going to be paying out money for people to take care of these foster kids, and we probably should. But if we're going to be doing that, there are situations, I'm sure, where, keep in mind, those family members didn't choose to have this child, but it would be better for that child to be with the family members, but maybe they can't financially afford it for whatever reason. And so saying, look, if we're going to end up having to pay people anyways to take care of these kids, we might as well be paying family members where they can feel still closer to family, not as abandoned by their family, those kinds of things. It overall seems like a fine bill. There's a reason why it flew through the legislature, and Beshear signed it, but Beshear's refusing to implement it. And here's why. So those of you who pay a lot of attention to the show, listen to the show, know I've been talking about Beshear doing this thing, specifically on bills he disagrees with. The most recent example I've really harped on is a bill passed in 2025 saying that taxpayer funds, Medicare, Medicaid as such, cannot be used to pay for gender transition treatments, hormone surgeries, or those kinds of things, basically acknowledging that this is a at least politically fraught issue and forcibly taking money from people through taxation and then forcing them to pay for things that they religiously or personally disagree with on such a visceral level, especially something that is certainly very new as far as a lot of this transgender stuff too. That's a misuse of taxpayer funds. And so they said, you can't do that. Well, Beshear tried to claim that he can't implement that law, is trying to claim he can't implement that law because he doesn't have the money to do so. And you may say, well, you're not giving services. How are you don't have money to not pay for something? That doesn't make sense. Well, he's trying to claim that if we do not allow these people to transition their gender, that they will need extra mental health care, and it'll actually end up costing the state more than just giving them the drugs, and that supposedly they don't have the money. And he's relying on a ruling from the state Supreme Court a few years back that said that if the legislature says, like, here's a program you have to implement, but they can't, that financially speaking, they don't fund it. If it's a mandate, unfunded mandate, you don't have to follow it. Basically saying if you don't have the money to implement a law, you don't have to implement it. And Beshear is claiming that because he's cooked up this idea in this Medicaid case that it will cost more to not give them meds, then he can now ignore the law. So essentially, his argument is if the governor can cook up any way, shape, or form that somehow this will cost more money, then they don't have to follow the law unless the legislature essentially bribes the governor to then follow the law. Now, the problem with these claims, and I've pointed this out before, is that the legislature, the way they budget, they do not do a line item zero-based budgeting. Now, that would be the most conservative thing possible to do. And what that would look like would be, okay, we start at zero, we take a look at our departments, and we say, okay, we're going into the Cabinet for Health and Family Services in this case, and here's the federal monies that we have to allot you from the federal government to do these specific things. And then we're going to give you these state monies, but we're going to line item them. So you're going to spend this amount on pencils. You're going to spend this amount on paper. You're going to spend this amount amount on salaries. You're going to spend this amount on computers. You're going to spend this amount on this, and actually going through line by line and saying how much they can spend on each individual item. Now, a lot of people would argue that this is unworkable for a governor or a executive branch to go through, but at the same time, the legislature has ultimate powers of the purse. But how they have been doing it priorly is saying, okay, Canada for Health and Family Services, here's a $500 million. Maybe if there's a few like specific projects, especially capital projects, like to build a building or something like that, we will put a line item in there, maybe 2 or 3 items that say you're to spend this amount of money on this specific program. But otherwise, we're just giving this money and telling you spend it how you want to. And so what Beshear's been doing on politically fraught issues has been saying he doesn't have the money, basically claiming he's already spent it. Now, he's ignoring the fact, of course, that he made decisions to give people extra Medicaid and food stamps and other types of benefits, qualifying more people at higher income levels and those types of requirements beyond what the law says, basically giving them more, allowing more people to be on those services than there has been a law passed for. So he's basically administratively deciding that he has the money in Canada for Health and Family Services to offer these services, so he's going to go ahead and spend that money there. But then when they come in and say, okay, here's something we want you to do. We want you to, in this case, expand out allowing family members of kids taken into foster care to receive foster care benefits. He's claiming, look, I don't have the money. Now, maybe on the more politically fraught issues, you could look at and say that's just plain politics. But now that he's doing it on such a bipartisan issue, I think he's making it pretty clear that from here on out, what he's trying to claim is if you don't, any law you pass, any new law you pass better come with more money. Well, that's going to make the legislature turn around and say, okay, so if we're going to have to constantly give you more money for every single thing that we say that the government needs to be doing, well, we're just going to line item budget you then. That's our only option before us. We're going to have to go line by line and say, spend this money on that, spend that money on that. You have stated, if I give you $500 million, and then I come back to you a year later as a legislature and say, hey, here's a new law. We want you to, go ahead and allow foster kids, parents of family members of foster kids to take in kids and get the same benefits as non-family members would in that situation. So keep in mind, you're not even creating a new program per se. You're expanding out the people who can receive the benefit from that program. And Beshear's saying, I don't have it. I don't have the $10 million that might cost. I don't have the $20 million that might cost. I don't have it. And then you're also doing that politically fraught issues, of course, as well. You're definitely forcing the hand of the legislature to then say, okay, well, you've made it clear to us you can't be trusted with money. You don't know how to manage it, clearly. So we're going to go ahead and go line by line and budget you. I think this would be great. I think it would cut out a lot of waste, because what we see all the time, and I pointed this out in my show, I pointed out all the time, we see things like Canada for Health and Family Services given $600,000 under some vaccine claim that to help vaccines out, we're going to give $600,000 to this LGBTQ group over here to put on drag shows pushing out vaccines, and we'll file that under Cabinet for Health and Family Services, or we'll give $2-3 million to this group or that. I mean, I was just looking at Council of the Arts, their handouts as far as who they're giving money to. And there's a lot of leftist groups in there that they are giving our tax dollars to, like Voices of Kentuckiana, which is at Kentucky, Indiana. It's not even just our state. LGBTQ choir. And we're giving them $6-7 of taxpayer funds. I mean, for all I know, that's their entire budget. I don't know how much money they're bringing in, but we're spending this money here, and you're saying you're saying I can't cut anything. Not a single dollar I'm spending can be put somewhere else. And so it's saying, okay, if that's the game you want to play, let's line item budget this guy. And I don't see how the legislature has another choice here, unless they're going to continue to be essentially held hostage to the governor, where every time they pass a law, they had to give him more money, pay him off. They're going to have to really, really start reining him in financially, and I'm here for it. I love it. Let's do more of it. I want it to be, we make a budget every 2 years. That's the way it works here in Kentucky. Every 2 years, we make a 2-year budget. And I want it to be a arduous process that we're constantly doing, where we're going line item by line item. I want the governor to have to call a special session in every time they want to spend a few million more dollars on a special project. I want him to be in a position where he has to do that. Do our basics, right? We need what? Roads, infrastructure, right? Law enforcement. That's our basics, okay? In fact, you could maybe even allow them to say, you know what? We'll allow the transportation cabinet is almost exclusively funded out of the road fund. That probably needs to be reined in a little bit there on what they're spending and how they're spending it, especially the no bid contract process. But anyway, putting that to the side, we're going to rein you in there, maybe, or we'll leave you alone there. That's a separate fund. We'll leave you alone with law enforcement. But every single one of these other departments, the Board of Education, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, that's a big department. The Economic Development Cabinet. You're not going to be able to spend a dime without first asking permission. That's a position you need to put him in if he wants to play these kinds of games, because he's definitely being at least disingenuous to say that. Well, coming up after this, I'm going to actually talk, and I know I've mentioned it a few times, about the Beshear podcast, not just how horrible it's doing, but also I noticed something this week when I went to go look to see how bad it was doing, considering who his guest was. He had Cal Perry on, and I'm like, and Austin Horn from the Herald Leader tweeted out, "Oh, this is surely going to help his numbers." And I'm like, I don't think it's going to help him. I don't think it will. And sure enough, it has not. And so in checking that, I realized something, that Beshear may have found a backdoor way to receive monetary payouts from his donors directly into his pocket. So we'll talk about that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So the Beshear podcast, right? I saw a post from Herald Leader's Austin Horn where he had said that he was retweeting Matt Jones. That's a pretty big account. Matt Jones, of course, Kentucky Sports Radio, tweeted out that the Andy Beshear episode, because I guess he did. He had on John Calipari, of course, former UK coach, to come on, and he had him on the show, hoping to drive up those numbers. Of course, I've gone in depth, and you can go back and listen to those episodes about exactly why the Beshear podcast is doing so bad. And I think people are realizing he has like a Kamala Harris effect here, except it's not as much that he sounds dumb. It's more that he sounds vapid and shallow. I think the longer Beshear talks, the more vapid and shallow you realize this guy is. You realize he's saying really nothing while just trying to make excuses for like really leftist policies. You know, he'll be like, "Oh, I'm the super nice, let's all get along guy," but then he refuses to have on people he might disagree with onto the show. And so it just leads to where there's literally no substance there. But anyways, so he's on John Calipari. Matt Jones tweets it out. Austin Horn acknowledges that in his tweet. He says that the show hasn't been doing well, admittedly, but this should help his numbers. And it really has not. And to give you a comparison here, it's harder to compare my show to his. Somebody had asked me about that on Twitter. Well, how do your numbers compare to his? It would be unfair of me to compare to his, because if I did, I could sit there and say he just had on John Calipari, and he's the current governor of the state, having on John Calipari. That episode right now, last I checked, had about 1,500, 1,600 all-in views. You have to add up both the video episode and then the podcast-only episode. It's kind of confusing. If you podcast, you understand what's going on in his YouTube channel. But he's got like 1,500, 1,600 views. John Calipari. It'd be unfair of me to compare that. I don't see what his podcast numbers are. Those are just his video views. I know my video views, I'll get that many 2,000-ish views just on my Facebook videos most of the time. This last episode where I had on Cameron, if you look at my Twitter, you look at my Facebook, and you look at my YouTube. Now, my YouTube views aren't very high. I'm going to go into why it's hard to compare us to, and that's why. I have over 11,000 views. So if I was to compare that way, I honestly, it'd be unfair to Beshear because I'm like 4 or 5 times more popular than him by those numbers. However, the reason why you can't compare him is because Beshear does not directly post on Twitter and Facebook the way I do. He just shares links to his YouTube. I don't do that. That's why my YouTube audience isn't as large, because where I would be posting links to my YouTube like he's doing, it'd be pushing a lot of the people who are watching the video on X or Facebook over to YouTube to watch it there. I have no idea what his audio-only podcast numbers are. Those are hard to see, but based upon how he's doing on YouTube and stuff, I'd say maybe a few hundred if he's lucky. And so he has on Calipari. To compare apples to apples better would be to compare him to Lee Watts. For those of you who don't know, Lee Watts, of course, is he does like a little 10-minute, 15-minute or so show once a week on Patriot Point, a YouTube channel. And it's almost exclusively like Kentucky politics. He touches on some national things, but it's mostly Kentucky politics. And it's a good, brief rundown of and it's meant to be, and he wouldn't disagree with me saying this. It's a surface level dig down into some like 5 or 6 headlines or stories that he wants to talk about over those 10 minutes, like a minute or two each one. Compared to mine, obviously, I cover 3-4 topics over the course of about an hour show. So it's a little bit different. But regardless, he is just posting on YouTube and then audio-only podcast. That's the same as Beshear's doing. So the governor of our state, with the last coach of UK, do an episode on YouTube, and over a day. It's been over a day now when I'm recording this, and he has less than 2,000 views. Meanwhile, he's 1,600 last I looked. Meanwhile, Lee Watts, as I'm recording this, put out an episode 12 hours ago, and on YouTube has over 3,000 views. For lack of a bet, not to put Lee Watts down, he's a smart guy, great guy, but he's just a guy, same way as me. I'm just a guy. And yet, the governor, Beshear's the governor, and he's doing half of what Lee Watts can do in 7 to 10 hours. He's doing half that in a day with Coach Cal. Like, that's how bad it is. It's so horrible. Anyways, but the reason why I want to bring it up wasn't just to, once again, restate just how bad it is, but in checking those views, I noticed something at the beginning of the show, that he had ads that he had went out and got. Let me play for you what those ads were here real quick. It's just like 30 seconds. I know I'm literally playing ads for you on somebody else's podcast, but I think it's important you know who these people are. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
This is a paid advertisement.
With over $25 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients, Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation.
Coolmore America, often referred to as the home of champions, is home to some of the best young sires in the United States. The stallion roster is led by Triple Crown winners Justify and American Pharaoh. And with a fantastic combination of proven sires and exceptional young sire prospects standing alongside the illustrious duo, it's safe to say Ashford's iconic stallion barns will continue to house influential breed shapers for many years to come.
Okay, there you go. So you had Morgan & Morgan and then Coolmore America, which is obviously a horse farm. They're talking about sires, things like that. You would know them better probably as Ashford Stud. That's the farm they own here in Kentucky. And I have to ask, what are they getting for their money? I mean, Beshear makes over, I think he makes, $165K a year or so as governor. Obviously, their house is paid for. I think most of their transportation's paid for, as if it's for business, right? Good healthcare system for him, a good pension plan. So he's got all that going for him. But yet, he's out here, slugging away selling ads on a show that might get 2,000 listens on average. For those of you who don't know, the value of that, you get about, if you're selling them yourself, and for those of you listening to this on like podcasting platforms, you'll hear ads cut in at each of my breaks. I'm not selling those myself. I use my podcast host I have enough listens. I've qualified for monetization through my podcast host, through Facebook too as well, and through some other places. And so they will play ads. They take a cut. But if you're selling them yourself, they're worth about $20 per 1,000 per ad spot. So it's if he's getting 2,000 listens per ad, that would only be $80 an episode. He does an episode a week, right? Now, granted, for your Joe Schmo, yeah, maybe $80, $100 a week, maybe even 120 if you can con them into it, would be good money. It would definitely pay for like, oh, if I'm doing an hour show, that makes my time worth it. My editing time, I'm at least paying myself, $20 an hour or so for my prep time, my show time, my edit time. That makes sense. But for Andy Beshear, who's doing this essentially as a more of a way to do, I thought it was a way to do prepare for a presidential run, but it might be just a way to cash in, because how much are they paying for those ads? That starts to become the question. I mean, the governor is essentially engaging in unless he says something else, unless he can explain what the money's going to and everything else, it appears that the governor's going into, and where's he filming this at too? That's the other question. Is this in the governor's mansion? That's a taxpayer funded building. Anyways, it going into, though, like, who's getting paid from these ads? Normally, the governor doesn't have like a part-time job on the side that whoever wants to can claim they're buying advertising from him and give him as much money as he asks for, and it be legal. And when we look at who they're getting, I mean, you look at Morgan & Morgan, he's one of the top Democrat donors in the country and in the state. Tens of thousands of dollars he's given to the Beshear campaign, whether it's to the campaign, to the PACs, to the party itself. He's a major donor. And then you look at Cool More America. I mean, that's a horse farm. It's clear there's a lot of regulatory oversight that the governor has through various boards and commissions, and through to the horse farms, to what's going on and their ability to make money. And keep in mind that, the horse farm Cool More America is owned by a gentleman out of Ireland. Now, normally, foreigners can't get involved in our elections, monetarily speaking, right? You had to be an American citizen. But I guess if you can legally figure out a way to line the pockets of a politician, you can do it. There's a lot of questions. It's a bad look. There was no good reason to sell ads. There's no way that me pointing this out, and you had to know that somebody like me would point this out, that you are getting money from these private entities. You have like a part-time job where you're being paid unknown sums of money directly. It can't be worth, if he's only getting $100, it's not worth it. He's got to be getting more. And that's a lot of questions to ask. But also, I got some questions for the legislature in light of those sponsors. We'll have those questions after that. And you are back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. For the break, I was digging into the Beshear podcast having sponsors. Odd thing, and who the sponsors were. Of course, Morgan & Morgan, John Morgan, one of the owners of that. I guess technically his wife's the other Morgan, I think is what he said. I don't know. Anyways, but John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan, you'd recognize him. He's on TV on all the ads. He's a big donor to the Democrats. Big donor. And so you start to wonder what's going on here. How much money is he pulling in from these ads? Because it just doesn't have that much market value, because this podcast sucks. But regardless, seeing that behavior from Morgan, where he's such a big Democrat donor, and he's so obviously heavily involved with Beshear, that he's literally willing to line his pockets, it looks like, potentially with some ad revenues. I mean, I don't know who's getting paid from it, but it looks bad. I'd love Beshear to come out and talk about who his sponsors are and how they're paying them and how much they're paying them and who's that money going to. But anyways, putting that to the side. So he's so clearly he's a big donor. John Morgan's a big donor to Kamala Harris too. So you'd say, you know what? When we have somebody like that is such a massive donor, funding our opponents, right? Maybe, perhaps, we should think twice before we give him, as Republicans, $100 million in no-bid contracts. But that's what it looks like the Attorney General's office has done. Now, this dates back a little ways, but the Morgan & Morgan have been given up to $100 million in value by Attorney General Coleman's office over the past year or two in legal fee contracts. Now, I say up to because the way this works is they're kind of like pre-authorized. So they're basically saying we are pre-authorized to spend this amount here if we want to. So the contract says 20 million and there's 5 of them. But that's just like their max spend. What's interesting about these contracts, though, is when you look at the notes on them, they said they're not feasible to bid. And that essentially means, and it looks like these were no bid contracts. $20 million no bid contracts. You know, it'd be one thing, and the weird thing about this too, to me, from a political standpoint, is it'd be one thing to say, look, we put this out for a bid, and yeah, this guy's funding our political opponents, but he does have the lowest price. And so it's the best value for the taxpayer. So we're not going to let politics get in the way of delivering the best value we can for the taxpayers. That's an argument I could hear and I'd follow you with. I'd say, look, if they're honestly the best for the job, and you bidded this out, you interviewed other people, and you said, look, this is our guys. Yeah, we don't like his politics, but his services are great. I'd say, okay, all right. But these are, according to the notes, these were not bidded out. So you made a decision. How is it not feasible to bid that out? I'd love that explanation. Is there not other law firms? Do other law firms not exist in the country? I get it. Morgan & Morgan's a big law firm, but they can't be the only law firm that could handle doing the Attorney General's work. There's a lot of, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of billings every year, law firms out there that can do the same size work. But yet they're getting what appears to be no bid $100 million contracts. And on top of that, from just why are you giving them the money that then they turn around and use against you without even establishing it's the best value to the taxpayer, but also as just sheer tactics side of things, why are you allowing the fox in the hen house here? Why would you allow such an obvious and active Democrat operative business to be so intimately familiar with how your Republican-led elected position's office is operating? Because those are the kinds of things, you find out little things about, oh, this is how this is operating. Oh, hear the whisper, hear the rumor mill in the offices as I'm talking to people and I hear about things. And then I can go back and say things and maybe that ends up in the right person's ear where now they can go digging. You don't even got to be a whistleblower. They can just go digging with the right information. You can go start to push the right buttons. Why are you doing that? And then on top of that, now switching over to Cool More America. And this is just really weird because I'd made a post on my social media about the legislature spending almost $700,000, not the legislature, sorry, Beshear spending almost $700,000 to pay a marketing firm to market Kentucky as a tourism destination and UK and other Eastern European countries. And just a pause there on that $700K, and I posted about this online, but the numbers for how we recoup that doesn't make sense. I mean, just using the state's numbers, assuming a 10% tax capture on all dollars spent, which is what the Kentucky tourism website establishes, is that it's about 10%. So of all the dollars a visitor spends here, the government takes in 10% of that. Not the state government. Keep in mind, I mean, that's split. Local governments pull that in and everything else. So, we'll just ignore the fact that's not going directly to the state and the state's spending it. Just pretend like the state's doing is a handout to these other counties. So we'll just say if it's an investment, which is marketing's always an investment, you're gonna get something for your money. You're hoping to make more money off of that. Well, I was like, how much would you have to get? And based upon their numbers, they say that the average international visitor to Kentucky spends $632. So that means we would need at least 11,000 new visitors, assuming a 10% tax capture on all dollars spent, in order to break even with our marketing push. I say 11,000 visitors, that's not too bad. Until we look at the data, according to the Department of Tourism's data, in 2022, 210,000 international visitors came to Kentucky. Now, they say visitors. They don't say tourists. That's key. That's a key importance, too, because that is how many people are here on business from international. So there's 194 other countries. Out of those 194 other countries out there, all 194 of them put together, according to the state's numbers, 210,000 came to visit Kentucky, and we don't know if it's for business or for tourism, because if you're justifying these marketing dollars, it's for tourism only, not for business. So let's assume a 50-50 split. It's probably not that good, but let's assume a 50-50 split. That's 110,000. So you would have to get a 10% increase of tourism from just 4 of the other 194 other countries everybody comes from. So that means those countries would probably have to see closer to a 25 to 40% increase on tourism in order for this money to break even. There's not a marketing campaign out there that could suddenly guarantee you a 40% increase from one country of tourism. There's just not. And I don't think they run the numbers. I don't think they even sit there and ask themselves. It's just like, well, we got to spend it. I think it's time we start asking ourselves some questions about investments. But on that note, and talking about Beshear's donors, and so I posted about that, and a legislator texted me and said, hey, we actually passed a bill last year that is also a real head scratcher, and that is, I believe it was House Bill 552. And House Bill 552 established the Kentucky-Ireland Trade Commission. I bring that up because remember, Cool More America, one of Beshear's sponsors, is owned by an Irishman that lives in Ireland. Has a horse farm there too as well. And yet, so we're setting up this Kentucky-Ireland Trade Commission, and I have to ask why. Is that the behest of this same person who's giving money to Beshear? So you're going to go ahead and give more, help out and give more money to a guy giving more money to Beshear? Like, why are you funding your enemies? Putting that to the side. But there's, like I've said a million times now, there's like 194 other countries. Ireland is 25th in GDP in the nation. Are we going to set up 194 different trade commissions? Why did Ireland get its own special trade commission? What's the claim here? Now, maybe you can make some argument that clearly they have something about horses. I'm not that into the horse culture to know if Ireland's super big in horses, but apparently it is. If, you know, there's a guy owning farms in multiple countries that is out of Ireland, that seems important, maybe. So you have that, and I guess you can make the argument about whiskey versus bourbon, right? But they're kind of in competition a little bit. Maybe import. I know some bourbon makers here in Kentucky will import Irish whiskeys and sell them. So maybe it's like trying to do it the other way. Of course, they didn't do a cost analysis to see if, this is a good expenditure of dollars. But it just goes into this entire fiscal thought process. As I said, I think Beshear's doing more for fiscal responsibility because he's forcing politically the Republicans' hands to do something in this case. To line item budget him because he's being so obstinate. Because this is the Republican spending plan. Just keep spending money and creating more programs and more groups and more everything. Nothing is permanent as a government program. We just created this Irish Trade Commission. It will probably never go away. From now and forever, there will be an Ireland, Kentucky Trade Commission, and nobody will know why. That's what we have to deal with. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank y'all so much for joining me. We'll be back here next week. Hope you have a great rest of your day.